All right, welcome to our quick review. Gonna just talk about kind of types of religion or major categories of religion. The slides are designed to accompany the textbook People, Places, and Culture. I am Miss Gall and I'll be your host for the lecture. So there are a few different ways we can categorize religion. So we're going to look at those and then we're going to end by looking at a map to kind of show us where do we see major religions predominating in the world. So one of the ways that we can categorize religions is to look at how they view God. Okay, so monotheistic religions, mono means one. Okay, that's a prefix. Theism, that's a reference to gods or religions. Monotheistic religions, religions that believe in a single God. Polytheistic, poly means many. So polytheistic religions are religions that believe in many gods. And when we're talking about monotheistic and polytheistic religions, these gods they're animated. Okay, so when we see those gods portrayed, oftentimes they're portrayed in some version of a person. Okay, so for example, when we see Christian iconography, God is often portrayed as a man. If we want to talk about polytheistic religions, we could talk about Hinduism, and often the Hindu deities are portrayed as having an essentially human form with some different characteristics. So Hindu deities, for example, are often portrayed as having many different arms. So it's a variation on a man. Animistic religions, on the other hand, these are ones that believe that inanimate objects possess spirits and that those spirits need to be respected and shown appropriate respect. So these are the religions that believe, for example, that trees have spirits, or that rocks or rivers or mountains have spirits. Okay, and that we need to show those things appropriate respect in order to help keep the world in order. So examples of monotheistic religions, the major monotheistic religions, really we're looking at Judaism, we're looking at Christianity, we're looking at Islam is the other major monotheistic religion. We could include Buddhism in there potentially, but it depends on which branch of Buddhism we're going to talk about. Okay, polytheistic religions, these are religions again that have many gods, and probably the best example of this is Hinduism. Okay, and then animistic religions, the ones you're most likely to be familiar with, these are often indigenous religions, by the way. Native American spirituality is generally animistic, and also if we look at Africa, a lot of indigenous African religions are also animistic. So another way to look at and categorize religions are to talk about what are called universalizing religions versus ethnic religions. And there are some major differences here. Okay, so ethnic religions, these are religions where you're born into the faith. Okay, these are not religions that go out and seek converts. Okay, these are religions that are very, generally speaking, spatially tight. So for example, Hinduism is a major ethnic religion. It's probably the one that has the most adherents in the world. And if we were to look at a map of where do we find Hindus, we're going to find them almost all in India and a little bit in Southeast Asia. Okay, so it's very tightly spatially located. And Hinduism itself is about the space in India and in Southeast Asia. Okay, Judaism is the exception to this rule, largely because of Jewish history, and you don't necessarily need to know a ton of it, but the general background is that under the Roman, they get spread out, call that the diaspora. They get spread out into Europe under the Roman Empire, and they spend really the better part of about the last 200 years being spread mostly throughout Europe, okay, until World War II hits. And then with the Holocaust, what we end up seeing is there was always, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a call for Jews to move back to the Middle East because it really gets its start. The hearth of Judaism is modern-day Israel. But in the aftermath of the Holocaust, what you see are those calls for a Jewish homeland really become screams, for lack of a better term. And so what you see now is that Judaism is slowly but surely becoming more concentrated. So it's not that there aren't pockets of Jews in Europe, it's that really there's two major areas where Jewish folks live in the world. One is in Israel, the other is in the US, and then there are smaller pockets spread throughout Europe. Universalizing religions, though, these are religions, they're not tied to a specific space, although certainly they have religious places, right? And but these are ones that go out and actively seek converts. These are the folks who really or metaphorically go door to door and talk to people about their religion. They believe that their religion has a universal appropriateness, a universal appeal, and that it really is something that everybody should believe in or belong to. Okay, and really great examples of universalizing religions. Christianity in all its branches is a universalizing religion. Islam in its branches is a universalizing religion. Buddhism also in its branches, universalizing religion. So again, these are ones that seek converts. So as a result of that, well, we can point to a specific hearth, actually in all three of those cases in a specific place, and say that religion got its start there. What we see if we were to look at it spatially, and we'll do that in just a moment, is that it's actually spread out fairly wide across the world when we're talking about where do we find major groupings. So let's go ahead and do that now and take a look at our map here. So for example, if we're looking at Christianity, and Christianity are shades of pink for this specific map, so we see most of North America and South America, actually really pretty much all of North America, most of South America, right? We see large swaths of Eurasia, all of Europe, and then spread kind of with the Soviets in particular, spread throughout Asia. We see Southern Africa has large swaths of Christians. All right. If we compare that, then we look at Islam. Okay. Islam is spread mostly through what we would call the Middle East, Southwest Asia, right? Northern Africa, kind of around the Horn of Africa, and then down along the coast, which makes sense because those were where the major trade routes were. Okay, and again, what we see is that it's spreading outwards from there. Okay, Southern Africa is actually kind of a funny place because we've got lots of many of the countries there where the southern part is Christian and the northern part is Muslim, and so that can then lead to some tensions and some conflicts, ostensibly about religion and oftentimes more realistically about resources and access to resources and who has the right to use the land in which ways and things like that. If we want to look at Hinduism again, remember I said you were going to find it spatially concentrated in Southeast Asia? Sure as shooting. That's what you find, right? India and a little bit in some of the countries that border India. Buddhism actually got its start in India, but it spreads outward from there, and so you see large swaths of Buddhists throughout Southwest Asia, right? Or Southeast Asia, sorry, depending on where exactly we're talking about, but also into China, into Japan is heavily Buddhist, right? And then what we can also see, and we can look at some more of those ethnic religions, so we could look at Shintoism, for example, as a major religion in Japan. We could look at some of those grayer areas where we've got those traditional or shamanist religions, and then also some kind of mixed belief systems, including traditionalist systems. All right, and what you'll notice if you look at where do we see those traditionalist systems, we see them in isolated places. And by isolated, what I mean is, for example, the middle of the Amazonian rainforest. Right, places that don't come in much contact with the major world, or with the rest of the world. We see it in Eastern Russia, right, where there's not a lot of people and not as much contact as you might expect, right? New Guinea. So this has been our quick review talking about kind of how do we categorize different types of religions. We talked about categorizing them based on the number of gods they believe in and what types of gods. And then we also talked about categorizing them based on how they spread or don't spread, how they diffuse across the world. We ended by looking at where do we find major religious groups in the world, because that's really the geographic question, right? How do they spread, why do they spread, and where do we find them? So if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. Please just go ahead, bring them into class, and I will see you the next time we meet.